Hi, I'm Diane Prince, and here is my entrepreneur chat question of the day, or of the, I don't know, of the week, or whatever it is. So I spoke to an entrepreneur yesterday, and his question was he has a local business that has about $250,000 in revenue, and they do, turn this off, and they do commercial services. It's sort of, I'm not going to go into specifics to preserve the confidentiality, but it's a commercial service that's sort of construction slash maintenance. And his question was, he's very successful in his geographic market and niche, and he's looking to expand in other areas. And the question was, how do I expand without having to be there? And he's also wondering how he can eventually set up his business to sell it for an acquisition. So here are some things that we talked about. One of the things that we uncovered, well, first of all, that he needs to set up a Yelp account. He did not have one. So to set up and get some testimonials or reviews that can be used as testimonials as he's expanding, because he's going into markets where people don't know him. The other thing that we looked at is growing into areas. Well, one is to mitigate the seasonality of his current market, because the nature of his business does not have to be seasonal. It's just seasonal because of the climate, the cold climate that he lives in. So the goal is next to expand in other areas that are going to balance out that seasonality of the business. From there, right now he's in a very kind of isolated area where there aren't really any. It's not a cosmopolitan area where there's other cities nearby. So something to look at is how to build into hubs nationwide where you can expand around that city. So it might even be, maybe it's Phoenix, and you can then even expand to Las Vegas, where you have somebody on the ground or in that location who could manage that area. We also talked about, because of the nature of his business, starting the expansion with even the use of marketing from where he's at. And I found out, he knew this, but two of his clients are national institutions. So, he works with the local contacts there. So one way to expand could either be, if you decide, it could be deciding on an area. So it could be, say it's Vegas and Phoenix, and saying, who could you introduce me? So who should I talk to? Hey, we are expanding we have opened a Phoenix office. Who should I talk to? And to me, when you use that language and say who instead of do you have a recommendation, when you say who, it actually gets the person's brain thinking about who, so that their thought process can give you an answer instead of just a yes or no question. So to think about that and get an introduction from your client who's a fan and knows your work. Another way to approach it could be where you could actually ask that person, where else do you think that you could use us? Where else do you see a need as we're expanding? Our next location is Vegas or Phoenix or whatever. And where else could you see that there's that we could be helpful to you? So that's one way to expand. And then you could also do it through, because of the nature of his business, and most businesses have contingent labor available. So he could even do it through a temp agency that's local. And that way, that agency there's fees added, obviously, to the hourly wage, but that covers unemployment, it covers workers' comp, and setting up as payroll in that state. So that's a way that you could expand without actually having to go through all those channels. And then usually with staffing agencies, you have the option, once somebody has contracted with you for a certain amount of time, to bring that person on full time without a fee. So that's one way that you can look at it to expand, until then, as you're building up, until you get eventually maybe you decide then that you want somebody as you might want somebody close by, or might want an operator, regional manager, whatever. Another question was, how do I keep the quality as I expand? And so there's a different ways to answer this question, but one of the blunt, brutal, honest ways is it's hard. I mean, if you're an owner and you're on top of all of the work and you're doing the work, it can be hard, and there's going to be things that aren't perfect. So obviously you want to have the best quality and you want to preserve your reputation. You also want to hire the best people. And that's another, I'm going to post a video about that and hiring and how to hire and scale. Or you can always call me if you want to talk about it, if you want to have a session, or if you want me to work with you on creating a program to build your team. But it is part of scaling is letting go. And it is the ability to delegate. And I think it's an EOS term from the traction book. I think that's where it's from, maybe, but I think it is the delegate and elevate exercise, where you basically, you cannot grow if you're not able to give up certain things and delegate. And maybe you'll hire somebody who's better than you, which would be totally ideal. Then lastly, the part of the question was, how do I set up my company for an acquisition? I eventually want to sell my company. So again, this business is it about $250,000 now, and the goals are to be at $5 million in 5 years, which, judging from this business, it's very, very doable. And so one of the things that has helped me in getting acquired is building relationships. And this business owner has, he's setting himself up. He's setting basically a 5-year time frame. So that's time to build up relationships. So one thing that worked for me once, when I'd been out of the business for a little while, I was retired for a few years in my 30s, and then when I got back in it, I knew it was important to me to build up connections. So I started volunteering as a speaker at some conferences. I'd get my admission, so it was like sort of paid, because I get my admission paid to go. One time I was in staffing, and one time I got invited to Manpower, which was one of the biggest staffing companies in the world, to do a tweet up from their office. So these different things really gave me an in and connections to executives in giant multi-billion-dollar companies. And a business like the one I'm talking about might not need a multi-billion-dollar company, but these are ways to start building relationships. One of my clients has a service business, and he acquires other companies. Most of, if not all of the acquisitions he's made have been entrepreneurs who he knows through networking and the things that they've done together. And those are some of the tips that we shared in our conversation. I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have other questions specifically in your business. There's lots of ways to build businesses, and I'm a big believer in revenue building, doing things that make sense. And I coach entrepreneurs based on my experiences, things that have worked for me, and tools that I've learned along the way. Also, there's that emotional stuff. Knowing what it's like and what it feels like to go through that, because it might sound, I feel like this video has made it sound a little bit simple, but it's not. And anyway, so if you're finding yourself stuck and needing help, feel free to reach out to me, and you can ask me a question that I could answer on a YouTube video, or we could do a call to see if you'd want to work with me one-on-one. So I wish you the best in your business today, and reach out if you want some more help.